Okay.
Okay, cool. So hello everyone. Thanks for joining. So this is our fourth SIG meeting. So today we have a packed agenda. So we'll be having the first presentation from Konstantin. He'll be presenting about the Concurs versus Circle CI. And then we have a couple of open discussions. So the first one is all about so how to audit activity on the Cloud Foundry platform. And so another one is all about the application metrics and then platform metrics for Cloud Foundry using Prometheus. Yeah, so maybe we can straight away get into the first presentation from Konstantin. So maybe you can present and then yeah, we can take it away. Hello. So Konstantin, actually, we don't hear you.
Hey, can everybody hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you now. Yeah.
Yes, we can hear.
Yeah.
I think he was not able to hear us.
We can see your screen as well, Konstantin.
Hey, I think I can hear everybody, Somebody say something?
Hi, can you hear me?
Oh, yeah, all right.
Okay.
That's awesome. Okay. Can you guys see my screen? I'm assuming that yes.
Yes.
Awesome. Okay, so let's start it, and I'll open. I'll keep the chat open. So if anybody have questions or I love I kind of present free flow. So when the people interrupt me, I'm happy to kind of stop and explain. And really, I think from what I understood now, the goal of this kind of presentation is really to kind of dive as deep as possible and to show like as many differences and similarities as possible and what works, what doesn't work. and then we'll go from there. Okay, just give me last thing. Okay, cool. So let's start. First I'll start by introducing myself. My name is Konstantin Itskov. I go by Costa. I guess I'm a serial entrepreneur at this point, or not. I don't know if the most successful, but whatever. My day job is professionally what I do is help out companies and sort of at a very early stage, mostly minimal viable product development and up to like multiple clients. That's what I love. I love programming, and I love kind of really putting my hand in there and setting up teams. I have a couple of my own companies, and so really my experience is mostly like doing a lot of everything. It just happened that Concourse is one of my favorites. I don't use it as much today, but I definitely messed around a lot with it and internally as much as I could. And these days, a lot of it I use Circle CI for most of my projects. And so it was kind of asked of me to dive deep and explain as many details and differences as possible. So let's go at it. So this is how I sort of know a lot of the stuff. So on the agenda today, I think I have like 30 minutes to present. I don't know if my presentation is that long, but what I figured what we can do is maybe we can, the demo section is really long. So I will try to actually set up projects almost from scratch for both Circle CI and Concourse, so we can actually see the differences in real time, and then I'll just show it in code, and then from there we can just kind of open up questions and hey, show me this or show me that, and I'll be happy to kind of talk about it. Okay, so the agenda today is basically do a general introduction. I'll run really quickly through like what is CI CD, or like why the hell do we need it, and I think that kind of slide is silly here, but whatever. I'll do comparison of core concepts between Circle CI and Concourse, and to kind of explain how I see them as from the perspective of the companies that are actually developing it. And then we'll dive into a little bit the differences and similarities of like configuration files and what does it mean, user interfaces, just generally, and I'll actually show it in a couple of projects so we can compare. And then really I'll dive into a demo. And just we'll kind of take it as is. And finally, I'll wrap up with like a few points about supportive community, because I think a lot of the times people don't touch that in presentations, and I kind of about projects or product in general, and then I'll wrap up in like my own points, and we can start having a full conversation about it, anything you guys want. Okay, so let's go. Continuous integration. Why the hell do we need it? So there's a whole bunch of different points, but I kind of listed 7 of the ones that I personally care about. And some of them are continuous integration is really these days have become almost a standard norm pretty much in every company, especially in small companies where you have a small group of people, but you really want to just deploy without ever necessarily having a really deep interaction about the deployment process. And the reason for it is because small teams don't have DevOps people. So most of the engineers end up doing everything, and the diversity in skills of engineering is quite large. So you have to assume that if you have a front-end engineer working in a team and a back-end engineer working in a team, maybe neither one of them actually knows enough DevOps to deploy things properly. And so you want to really set up like a continuous process for integration and deployment. And this is where it comes in. So like some of the points are when you have a really good automated process, it's really to deploy very fast small chunks, and when you minimize the small chunks, it's easy to debug. when it's like 300 lines of code every iteration, it's very, very easy to debug for all the people involved. And so even front-end engineers can actually learn what's going on with the code. And that's kind of like the second point. More people can review. There are a lot of projects, a lot of open source projects that I've seen these days where there's one person who's managing the entire process, and there are 200-300 contributors. But the way they achieve that is by allowing anybody to actually merge into the trunk, into the main, into the master branch. But then in the process, what people do is they let everyone else involved actually review each other's code. And by doing that, they're sort of, anybody can review the code. Consistency improves confidence. I think that when you set up automated testing, then there's a central place where the testing have to pass. And so that means no matter who is pushing the code, there's always consistency about what kind of test is, which tests are being run and how they're being executed. And so that gives confidence. I encourage a lot of small teams often to just commit little pieces. If you're working, even if you're working on a piece of code that is a 2-week long piece of code, commit the little pieces that belong to the code along the way, because once you commit those little chunks of code, there's some confidence about the fact that they're in the master branch. Even if they're not being used by the application yet, they're there. And once they're there, you sort of mentally, you separate away from like, oh, this can break. Another point is frequency just scales down complexity. That means you can build a big project very fast by committing very little pieces of the code. And the only way you can do that with a growing team is when each engineer can sort of do that independently. And the only way you can do it is with continuous integration. Catching bugs early, that's the easiest one. You really, as long as you have a very good continuous integration process, you can just catch things quickly. Faster development cycles, and that's a non-brainer. And I think one of those that sort of are missed out on some of the tools, some of the integration tools are monitoring and measuring code quality. And I'll try, maybe I'll show you like a couple of open sources as an example where if you integrate code quality measurement tools into the actual continuous integration process, then it insights on the sort of like the quality of the project. It gives insights on the quality of the project. And if that happens, it's much easier to actually manage the entire project as it keeps scaling purely from a code quality perspective and not necessarily from how many engineers are involved, which is kind of an amazing fact because it separates completely between the engineers that need to do the work and the quality of the product that actually needs to be delivered. Okay, so in terms of tooling, I mean, these days there's a whole bunch. I'm sure a lot of you guys know a lot of them. There's a whole bunch of them. I kind of plotted different. I saw this a lot of other presentations present this like this. So I plotted a bunch of different logos. In particular, we're talking about Circle CI, which is this one, and Concourse, which is this one. Okay, so next. Core concepts. So this is sort of the core concept is sort of the ideology behind the Concourse product and the Circle CI product, and this really kind of the distinguishing factors behind the thinking of how to do this. So in Concourse, the core concepts are resources, tasks, and jobs. At least at this moment, as far as I've seen in the development branch. The resource, and I've taken this straight from the website. So resources are they represent external inputs, and basically resources are the things that you attach externally. So like an example would be you have something that checks your Git repository. That's something that checks Git repository is a resource. In Concourse, resources can be extended fairly easily. You can construct new resources by yourself. I've done that multiple times. Once you do it, once you're doing it at least one time, it becomes really, really easy. And it can be done in any programming language. which is amazing because it allows you to kind of attach anything out there. Tasks are just the pipeline processes. So like this is, you would, if you're creating a pipeline, you would separate the pipeline into different tasks. Like let's say one task would be linting, and there's a bunch of different steps in linting. And then another task would be releasing or testing. That would be a separate task. And then jobs are independent pieces of work within a task. So this is sort of the core concepts of Concourse. The one thing that I will mention about Concourse is that Concourse has this idea behind idempotency. So meaning there's a really core kind of, it's not strictly written, but there's a really core thinking behind the design, which is about making sure that every step in the pipeline is completely replicatable. And that means however you build the actual application, which is Concourse, needs to ensure that kind of reproducibility. And that's kind of unique for Concourse. I haven't seen that strictness with other projects. Circle CI, on the other hand, Circle CI is a little bit different. Circle CI has very similar concepts like tasks and jobs. They don't have tasks, but let's say jobs. But they have these added concepts. One concept is called orbs. So orbs is roughly speaking comparable to resources, but it's a little bit different. With resources, you can actually create using your own code, sort of whatever the hell you want, and I'll show this by example. On the other hand, with orbs are replicatable code. So what happens is that you can write up your configuration file for how the entire continuous integration process is going to happen. You can litter it with a bunch of variables inside, and then you can wrap it up in what they call orb and put it on an orb store. So you can actually kind of link it out to other people to employ. And so what you see that there's let me show you this quickly. There's a whole orb, Circle CI orb registry. There's a whole registry for these orbs, and some of them are supported by large organizations, and some of them are not. And they're really quite useful because some of them are really like verified, and like you can see, so here AWS deployment stuff, Elasticsearch, and so on and so on and so on. And some of these orbs provide extra tooling within the application. What's powerful about it is because it's kind of like a registry, because you have a place to go and just grab them. So when you're not necessarily a very experienced DevOps engineer, it's easy to just come in, grab one, and do it. But when you're working on a bigger team, you can actually create these for your internal team fairly easily, and that will work. That's kind of a big difference with resources. Another concept they have is something called a workspace. So let me just show you by example, because I like this. It's simple. So workspaces they're an attempt at dealing with idempotency, making sure that oh, sorry, this, am I talking about workflow? No, workspaces. Sorry. So workspaces are an attempt at dealing with idempotency. In effect, what happens is that when you're designing a flow, when you're designing a pipeline, you can actually create separate jobs that are going to execute, whether in parallel or not. And in the process, in between jobs, you're going to be transferring some kind of resources. So let's say you have like a build job, and the build job is going to produce something. And that's something you want to be using in another process, in another step of the pipeline. And what's going to transfer in between them is a workspace. Really, workspace is just a folder, but what's unique about it is that folder is anything that goes into that folder gets hashed. And so it's completely reproducible meaning that whatever the files and everything that's going to go there is going to be exactly the same way if you end up rerunning just one part of your entire pipeline. So let's say you had a really complex pipeline, build was successful, test was successful, but then between test and deploy failed. So now you end up going back into your dashboard and you want to just rerun the deploy because you've changed something. You can actually just rerun the deploy. And the resources that the deploy will end up having are going to come through Workspace, and they're going to be exactly the same ones because it's replicatable. Now it becomes much more complex when you have situations where you have multiple resources that converge into one, and then there's question of like which resources take which are the resources that are ended up taking ownership, and this is sort of like what Workspace is. It's the entire concept of how to do it. This is so these are kind of like the core concepts the way I have gotten exposed to. Okay, let's jump to how do we configure this, and please stop me because I'm assuming that everybody really knows this or have at least experience with some kind of continuous integration tools. So I'm not explaining like what is a configuration file at all. Okay, so let's look at the differences. I've kind of compiled here two side-by-side programs that are almost the same, but they're not exactly. And I'll run quickly through them. So Circle CI first. Circle CI first main difference is that files are usually placed within a specific place. It has to be this way. With Concourse, that's not the case. You can place files wherever you want. You can actually link them in this way. You have, with Circle CI, you have something called jobs. The same as here, you have jobs. Within a job, you separate the jobs by I guess tasks, by different chunks. In here, it's just a map, so you can list them, blend, test, and so on and so forth. Here you have a little bit more information because some of this information gets communicated to the user interface. In terms of each one of the tasks, Circle CI has kind of these steps, and you just run. Here I'm doing a little bit of an abstraction. You can do this. They have something called an executor. So an executor, when you're running a particular task within a Concourse, you actually define the configuration. So you say configuration, platform, Linux, and you link it to a specific container or a Docker container. In Circle CI, you can do the same step or do the same way by using an executor. So you define an executor ahead of time. And the executor may be parallel. So in this case, I'm actually defining an executor that will deploy two Docker containers at the same time. And these two Docker containers are going to become available for this step, for this specific job during the same execution, and it's going to be parallel. So they're both available there, and it's like in place. You can just copy this in here. This is just an easier way to do it if you have the same job, the same executor that you're executing every single time. Same here. You can kind of abstract this. For the most part, because you have resources, and the resources are much more general. You can actually create a resource called Docker, and you can give it a name, and then over here you're very simply you can use it. In terms of execution, in Circle CI, there's something called run, and you just hit run every time. I find this a little bit easier. In Concourse, there's just a way to sort of do a pipeline. So you do arguments -c, and you're just running shell. And in shell, you're just going to write out your code as is, which is not necessarily the case for Circle CI, and not as easy to do. So this is kind of like at a big view, the big difference. In terms of like actually, and I'll jump into this, in terms of what actually similar and what actually different, similarities, both are in YAML, so that's kind of similar. Workflows are kind of similar. Workflows are different than workspaces. So workflows are the presentation or the ability to construct pipeline steps. So it's a little bit, it's the same, you just write it differently. So in here, in Circle CI, you can see that I'm constructing a workflow by creating 2 jobs, and then I'm saying that I have a job called lint, and then I have a job called test, but test requires lint. And so by doing that, you're creating a requirement, means that test will never run until lint is done. The same can be achieved in Concourse in this way. So you have something called parameter passed, and you can create a plan where each job actually requires for something else to be passed. And that means when you're executing a pipeline, until, like, let's say integration have been completed as a step, this step is not going to be executed. And then both of them are obviously using Docker environment for automation. One major distinction with Circle CI is that because Circle CI is a cloud-hosted technology, they have an entire process for automating deployment of actual machines. So whenever you run tests, it actually generates a machine for you, or a virtual machine for you. And because of that, you can control. You don't actually have to run everything within a Docker container. You can run it straight up on Metal, but you can also, they also provide the ability to run it with Mac OS, which is not the case for Concourse. Webhook integrations, I think this is really important, and I'll touch on this a little bit later. Part of the ideology in Concourse is that they don't allow, or they don't support very good third-party integration from a perspective of webhooks, meaning third party cannot notify Concourse in a very easy way that something needs to happen. There are some integrations that were added later as a hack, but I don't, it still doesn't feel like it's completely supported. That's not the case for Circle CI, and at least for me, that's a really big point, and I'll show it later. Shareable configurations, and it's a little bit, they're constructed differently. Resource extensions, again, they're kind of the same thing. They're constructed differently. Here you construct actual extensions, sort of plugins, applications, whereas with Circle CI you construct these shareable configuration files. And then obviously one is cloud hosted, the other one is really like self-deploy, set it up anywhere you want. And it works both ways. It depends on what situation, what project you're working on. Okay, next, in terms of user interface UI. Side by side, this is a view for jobs. You can, this is my screenshot, so I have a bunch of other personal projects that I run on continuous integration right now, but I kind of put the same project here. You can see there's a lot more information for Circle CI. You can kind of, I'll show you, there's a way to jump in, but at least from the view of like selection of all the other ones, all the other projects side by side, there's a lot more information on Circle CI. Here's another, this is kind of like me jumping into the actual information inside of the project. Again, there's a lot more information here, what's going on with the actual pipeline. There's a way to jump in even further in here, and I'll show it later. But again, there's a lot more information to Circle CI. So at least from a usability standpoint, I would have said Circle CI kind of gives a lot more information straight up there. Okay, let's jump into the demos. Let me make sure that you guys will be able to see some of the code. Let me know if you can see the terminal.
Yeah, we can see the terminal.
Awesome. Okay, so let's quickly set up a simple project for Circle CI or for Concourse first, and then a simple project for Circle CI, and see sort of the process differences. So Concourse, usually the way it starts, so for Concourse, you always have to deploy it yourself. So usually it starts with like, how the hell am I actually installing Concourse? My quickest way to do this, at least locally in the machine, is going to be Concourse Docker. And if you jump into Concourse Docker, there's going to be instructions how to actually do it here. And as you do it, simply really like the process is very simple. You just copy this and then git clone. Once you clone it, you have to have Docker installed. And once you have Docker installed, there's a Docker Compose file here. So you can just do Docker Compose. Again, Docker Compose have to be installed. Docker Compose up. You hit Docker Compose up, and in effect, what will happen is Docker Compose will spin out your entire application, the whole Concourse CI deployment system. If you're trying to set this is locally. If you're trying to set this up for more of a production for your business or for a group of people, it's going to be a lot more work. So what that means, you will have to create somehow a deployment, maybe Helm, deploy it on either machine or maybe Kubernetes. But neither way, once you ran it, what's the URL here? Shoot, I did not mean to do that. But once you ran it, you can kind of do this. So. Does anybody remember what? Let me see. So here's a problem. I don't remember what the port is. See. 8080. Oop. This is gonna take too long. I'll figure it out. I'll switch to Circle CI and then we'll go back to this one. Oh, because Docker add to exited. Let me see. I think I know why. Sorry, I'm just turning off some other stuff that I have running. Let's see now if it's working. There we go. Sorry, I just ran it on a different screen. Okay, so once you load it up, it's straight up in here. In order to interact with it, you actually have to have another application called a Fly. You can download this Fly by just downloading it and setting it up in the right places. If you look through tutorials that exist, they're kind of going to tell you how to download, or you always download it from the version that whatever you installed, whatever Concourse you installed. Once you download it, you're going to download it through, you're going to download it and put it in the right folders where it's going to be accessible. Once it's accessible, now at this point, you can start interacting with it. So let's try. Fly targets. Okay, fly. Okay, so I just happened to have a target. What a target is you have to sort of authenticate yourself and connect. In this case, let's do tutorial. Let's call it a tutorial, and we're gonna log in. We're gonna log in into here. And then the user is going to be test and password is going to be test. Once we logged in, it lets us know that we have been logged in. And at this point, we can actually start interacting with it. You can always look at all the documentation. So in this case, let's fly help. It's going to give you all the different functionalities that you can do. We want to actually deploy a pipeline into here, so that the pipeline that I've created in the presentation, I'll actually deploy. In this case, Conqueror's Docker. The pipeline is right here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say fly target tutorial. You always have to point the target, because the target was you have logged in into this specific session, and I named it tutorial as a target. So I'll use target, and I'll say set pipeline. I'll point to a configuration file, and I'll give a name to this pipeline, in this case, Q. It's actually going to print changes to you. So it's going to say what is going to happen once you push it, and we'll ask you, do you want to do it? If you say yes, stuff will happen. And then let me log in here. Test. And once I logged in, the pipeline is here. It's anytime you add a new pipeline, it's always paused, so you can hit play. And at this point, the pipeline is going to start executing. So while it's executing, let me jump, for safety of time, let me jump back to Circle CI and show you how the process, sort of the same, happens for Circle CI. In Circle CI is a little bit different. Circle CI always attaches itself to some kind of a cloud-hosted repository. It could be your own hosted, it could be like Git hosted within your own computers, but the way you do it, so let's create a new project. I'm gonna jump to GitHub. And I'm going to create a new repository. I'm gonna call it test circle. It's gonna be public. I need to create it. Once I do that, I'm gonna grab it. Git clone. In here, what you'll have to do is you'll have to create a couple of one folder and one file. Here, it's called Circle CI. And inside of Circle CI, you'll have to create a file called config YAML. Vim. And so in this file, I'm just going to plot. I'm just going to put a bunch of information. Sorry, this terminal is not working so well. So I'm just doing this on a different terminal. You guys cannot see. Okay, I'll save this. So just so we can see what's going on, vim config. I've literally put the information here. This is deployment. This executes a Go application, so I'm just gonna delete some of the stuff so we can actually see what's gonna happen. Run echo hello. And then I'm gonna delete this stuff from here as well. Test. I'm gonna save this. Once I saved it, I'm just gonna commit it all. But before I actually commit, I'm just gonna go back to the project. And in the project, I will connect Circle CI to this to monitor this specific repository. So the way you do that is by going to Circle CI dashboard. And in the dashboard, you can do add projects. Usually the project will appear here automatically. You do that, just build a project. Right now there are no files there, so it's kind of gonna fail. The build is gonna fail, and we don't care about that. Okay, and once I've done that, I'm just gonna commit the code. Git commit some new code. Pushing it. Once you push it, it should automatically start. There we go. So now it's running. Let's jump back to Concourse. Concourse at this point finished. So this is how the exploration is going to happen. You're going to go into Concourse. Concourse, every step of the way, Concourse is going to break it into separate steps. You can look at the sort of like the printouts here. This is a printout that was testing one of my libraries, and the tests have succeeded. Concourse will fail if any of the tests fail. You can explore the actual pipeline by jumping in here, by actually jumping into the pipeline itself. So you'll see there's a, it's kind of beautiful. They'll show you like which resources are merging into where, and there are going to be more steps if there are more steps to the pipeline. Here, it's also succeeded. You can actually see this view as a workflow. When you look at the workflow, it's kind of the same thing. You have, you don't have resources pointing, but you have links and tests, and you can jump into each one of these steps and see what happened. And so, it deployed a Postgres, it linted, and it printed hello lint, echo lint. Okay. Okay, so this is sort of the UI differences. This is the demo. Last couple of things that I'll touch on. Community support. With Circle CI, it's kind of a commercial project, and everything. Whenever you have bugs or whatever it is, the only way to communicate it's sort of through a forum type system, which is you post a message and you wait forever. On the flip side, with Concourse, it's much easier because there's a chat. You can just jump in, and sometimes you're going to be talking to literally the main engineers who are like working on it. And it's great. They'll just tell you what to do and when to do and how to do it. So to me, I find that Concourse is significantly more important. So this is kind of the differences between between community support. The reason, at least for me, why these days I choose Circle CI more is the integration for the direct integration into repositories, which doesn't happen naturally with Concourse, and so that's number one. Number two, the resources is there's, as I said, there's an org kind of resource repository that doesn't happen with Concourse. With Concourse, you have to develop resources yourself if you can't find them. And the way you do that is in the following way, and I'm not going to build this up, but I'm just going to show you. And by the way, if you guys have any questions, this is pretty much it. So what you do is you construct these kind of repositories with 3 folders. You have check, in, and out. And inside, you have to put executable code. And as long as it's executable, it means that it can be run. And what will happen is that concourse will actually run each one of these, and these are 3 separate steps. And when you construct them in a proper way, then you can, inside of your actual code, you can define a resource type. And once you define the resource type, you can use it as a resource. There's a whole page for like explaining really the details of internally on the documentation, resource types, and you can construct, implement a resource type, and it will really teach you like how to do it. And it's fairly easy. So these are kind of the distinguishing factors. And this is pretty much it. So if you guys have any questions, I'll answer and show any examples from here.
I think I don't see any questions from any of them. So if there are no any questions, thanks consultant for a nice presentation. Maybe we can jump into the second topic. So that is all about how to audit the activity on the SIG platform. So Mickey, you can take it away. So Mickey, can you hear us?
No, we can't hear you, Mikey. I think they're still muted. I see Mike is still on mute though.
Okay, so maybe we can move the Mikey's topics to next week. So I think I see Toby also in the call. So Toby, would you like to take for the next topic? Or if you take more time, maybe we can move the topic also to the next week.
Yeah, we have about 7 minutes or 6 minutes left in the call. So, yeah.
Okay, sure then. So maybe I can move the next 2 topics to next week. Yeah. So if we start, I don't think so we can able to finish it in time. I think there'll be a lot of the questions will be coming in those 2 topics. Yeah. So that's what I also heard from a couple of colleagues. So they wanted to discuss more about this topic. Yeah. Maybe I can move those 2 topics to next week.
Yep, that works.
Yep. Okay, so if there are any, let's say, questions, let's say we can finish it in 5 minutes. If there are no questions, maybe yeah. So that's all for the day.
Do you want to remind folks that there will be an in-person meeting at Summit?
Actually thought of telling in the next meeting. So in the August month meeting, yeah. So in details. So that's why I did not include it.
Okay, but as people are starting to probably plan their agendas for the summit, it might be worth at least mentioning it, and then you can discuss the details of it during the next call.
Yeah, sure. So for the next CF Summit, it's happening in Netherlands. So we'll be having the SIG meeting there. Maybe in the Slack channel, I'll be sending the details about so which room it is gonna happen, and then all the detailed agenda about the SIG meeting. So maybe if somebody is traveling to Netherlands, so you could join us in the SIG meeting, yeah, so that we can have a person interaction and then get to know so what are the different the problems you're facing in day-to-day operations work and then all those things, yeah. So that will really help us to address it in this SIG meeting, and then we should able to help, yeah, so with all those pain points, yeah. So maybe in the next meeting we'll try to add some more details about so our agenda and then all those things, yeah, so that if you're traveling, so you can add it in your agenda so that you can join us for the um person interaction, yeah. Okay, so that's all for the day. Thank you. Thanks for all joining. Have a nice day. Bye bye.
Thanks.